Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to get started in about 2 minutes. We're going to let some other folks log on and we'll get started right at 1 o'clock. Okay, it is 1 o'clock, so let's get started. Oops, as I scroll way too far. All right. Good afternoon. I'm Angela Barger, the ESI Program Manager. I want to welcome you to the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality's Environmental Stewardship Initiative ISO 50001 Overview webinar. Over the next couple of days, you'll hear from myself, Don Burke, who is our membership or was our membership and outreach coordinator, is now one of our ESI coaches, and Davey Connors, who is another one of our coaches, who also assists us with EMS training and now also this energy management training. The three of us are staff that routinely provide that environmental management system training and assist members with environmental management system implementation. Many of our members have expressed an interest in the energy management system over the past few years, so we put together this overview of the ISO 50001 standard to assist their efforts. We also need to be sure to thank our partners at the Land of Sky Regional Council and the Waste Reduction Partners, which is a 20-year-old pollution prevention program that provides customized on-site technical assistance, including energy audits and assistance. They are also a part of our division, the Division of Environmental Assistance and Customer Service. So if you need any of the on-site, low-cost, no-cost energy audit assistance, please let us know and we can connect you with the waste reduction partners. A few housekeeping items before we dig into today's topic. If you have audio issues and you're using audio through your computer, you can switch to your telephone. Just go to that audio tab in the webinar controls box and click the phone. A phone number and a code will then be shown to you for you to access the webinar. And the call-in information is also in the webinar invite in your email. And also that reminder that you got today. We are recording today's session and we will post the recordings and copies of the slides to the ESI events webpage. So if you can't make a session or you want to hear something again, you have access. There is actually currently a session of this recorded and already there. So you're welcome to go ahead and listen to that anytime. And the handouts and things are there as well. We do have a couple of items in that handout sections of the GoToWebinar toolbox for you to download if you like. One is a PDF of the combined slides for both today and tomorrow. And the other is a tool for performing a gap analysis of your program, of your progress, toward implementing the ISO 50001 standard. That was put together by one of our interns last summer. We have everyone currently muted to prevent feedback and eliminate unintended background noise. Therefore, we ask that you submit questions using the question function on the control panel. If you need to add clarification to a question, you can use the hand raising function. To get to that, if you click on the attendee menu, you will see your name, and next to it should be a hand symbol. If you click on that, it sends us a notice that you'd like to speak. And then ESI staff will recognize you and unmute you so you can. All right. So today, we just went through the welcome. We are going to give you a brief overview of the ESI program. Then we're going to talk through energy management systems and the first part of the ISO 50001 2018 overview. And then we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. And then tomorrow we will talk through the second half of the ISO 50001 standard and have more time for questions and answers in case you think of something from this one overnight. You can definitely ask that tomorrow too. So just jot down any questions you have as we go, and we'll get started. And feel free to type questions into the box at any time, because all of us, I believe, are prefer to be asked questions as we're on the topic as opposed to going past it and then having to come back. So it's a little different than just a regular presentation since we're doing a training. All right, so the ESI started with about 20 facilities in 2002, and we've increased that to almost 200 facilities at about 96 members across the state. The program began allowing only entities that were permitted by DEQ, but we have relaxed that so that any organization can join, whether they're permitted or not, as long as they're willing to set and report on their environmental goals. This allows entities that have improved their performance through pollution prevention and other means to participate. For example, a facility that ceased their generation of hazardous waste and no longer needs a generator ID or any other permit can still be a part of the program. We have a wide variety of members, including small businesses, agribusiness, service providers, industrial manufacturing facilities, federal and state operations, some local governments, so a little bit of everybody represented. Our ESI membership has 3 levels, starting with our partners. The middle level was added in 2004, and in reference to environmental management systems only, the 2 higher levels, the Rising Steward and the Steward level, are required that organizations have either third-party certification or be deemed functionally equivalent by us to the ISO 14001 standard. About 35% of our membership have implemented an EMS. All right, so that's the high-level overview of the ESI, but today we're going to talk about energy management systems and specifically ISO 50001. As you can see, if you want more information about the program, you can contact me or you can contact Dawn, or you can specifically reach out to our service account, which goes to several of us here in case one of us is on vacation or something. So that ESI@ncDNR.gov is probably the best email address to use to reach out to us. All right, so energy management systems. So like an environmental management system, this is a proven tool. It has a specifically designed function to help organizations manage your energy related activities. And it helps you to successfully pursue your policies and goals that you put in place to manage that energy system. Environmental energy management systems. They provide systematic way of managing your organization's energy related information and efforts. So it helps you to determine what the most important things are so that you can work on those first. It makes sure that energy remains a priority within your organization. It helps you to keep things in order and consistent in order to address your concerns through making sure you have the appropriate resources, that you have responsibility assigned for the important pieces, that you have an ongoing evaluation to make sure that your processes and procedures are appropriate to what you're trying to do. And of course, like all ISO systems, it focuses on continual improvement. So why might you implement an energy management system? Well, it helps you to focus and avoid that flavor of the month syndrome, you know, where you hear a buzzword on TV or wherever, and everybody all of a sudden wants to meet that buzzword. What an energy management system does is to help you focus on those things that are important within your organization. You know, if you don't use a specific kind of energy, but everybody else is kind of on that bandwagon, well, how is having a goal related around that specific type of energy going to help you, right? So that's what this helps you to figure out, is what is going to make your system better. It helps you to prioritize energy related goals and support their need for resources and attention so they don't fall off the plate or get pushed out of the way by other things that are important at the time. It helps you to keep the importance level of your energy goals a priority for your organization. It helps to encourage the understanding of your energy performance and improvement throughout your facility, not just in the energy office, but among all of your employees that are helping you to achieve those goals and to track your performance. It also helps you to establish a framework in order to evaluate and reduce your energy demand. So we'll talk about it throughout the standard, but you know, it makes you set baselines and then determine what you're going to do to reduce your usage around those baselines. And then it helps to identify root cause of energy related problems. I mean, one of the things you have to do is have a corrective action system. So figuring out the true root cause of things will help you in the long run because you can eliminate those root causes. All right. Increasing your efficiency also has some side benefits. It can help you with reducing cost, and it can also help with reducing your carbon footprint and greenhouse gas contributions. And then it could also potentially help increase your plant productivity, quality. It can help you reduce scrap. It can help with improved worker comfort, increased available floor space, and it can also help improve safety depending on the types of projects that you put in place in order to reduce your energy demand. So what is ISO 50001? It is internationally, so ISO is an international organization. It is non-governmental. It represents over 100 countries worldwide. And ANSI, or the American National Standards Institute, is the U.S. representative. They are a founding member of the ISO organization. Like all of the ISO standards, it is widely adopted, it is auditable, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. The elements within the system have shall statements, and those shall statements are what you would be audited to if you decide to go for third-party certification, or even if you're just doing your own internal auditing. And it is compatible and easily integrated with other ISO standards, including 9,000, which is for quality, 14,000 for the environment, 45,000, which is health and safety. So, and you know, 50,000 being energy, falls right into 14 very strongly, and partially into those others as well. But the way they've organized the standards, they have renumbered them in the past few years so that, you know, when they talk about policy, it is the same number on throughout all of those ISO management standards. So you're always looking at that same part of the system. And so you can actually integrate and have a single policy for quality, environment, energy, safety, that combines all of those requirements easily within your systems. All right. So this came from the back of the standard. So if you're thinking about putting an ISO 50001 system in place, you'll definitely want to get a copy of the standard specifically. While our slides here basically will give you what's in the standard, it doesn't give you the background document, it doesn't give you the notes and things like that, and it doesn't give you this annex. And this annex is really helpful when you start, and this is true for 14,000 or any of the management systems. This annex that is behind the actual standard tells you what the folks who wrote the standard were thinking when they were used certain words and certain concepts. And so this is just one of the helpful pieces that is in the back of the standard. And so this is just talking about, okay, so these are the elements of the system that you're going to have, the policy, objectives, targets, all of that, and how they relate. So it starts with improving your energy performance. That leads to the achievement of other intended outcomes like that reduced cost savings and meeting your climate change goals, which leads to continual improvement of your energy management system. And when we talk about continual improvement, with all of the management systems that are provided by ISO, they all follow the Plan, Do, Check, Act model of continual improvement, also known as the Deming cycle. So for that, I should turn off the animation on this. For the standard itself, we start with planning. So that, of course, is your plan section. And with this, we're talking about, your risks and opportunities, your goals or those objectives. And then you do an energy review of what you currently have and what performance indicators are going to help you get where you want to go. You set your baselines, and then you figure out how you're going to collect your energy data. Under the Do section, you have the support functions of what your resources are, what you mean by competence and awareness within the standard, communication, documented information, and then you have the operational pieces. So that's your operational planning and control, design, and procurement pieces. And we'll go into each one of these elements over the next couple of days. Your check is your monitoring and measurement and analyzing the data that you're monitoring and measuring, your internal audit system that you put in place, and then your management review. And then you act on those pieces and go through your non-conformance corrective action process and your continual improvement. Now, there are two other sections of the standard that actually come before these, and they are both help with the framework and setting expectations for your facility as a whole. So the first of those is the context. So you want to understand the organization and its context in the world. You also want to understand the needs and expectations of your interested parties. Determine the scope, what fence line are you going to use for your energy management system, and then a statement on the energy management system itself. And then you also have leadership and commitment. There you have specifically who leadership is and what they're committing to do, your energy policy, and then the roles and responsibilities within that. So all of those are the framework pieces, Chapter 4 and Chapter 5, or Section 4 and Section 5 of the standard. And all of that will lead to continual improvement of your energy management system. All right, Davey, I think you're up.
All right, let me change presenters here. All right, are you guys able to see my screen?
I am.
Okay.
Yes, indeed.
Excellent. Let me just move this over here. All right, so as Angela said, we've designed these slides to be very close to the ISO 50001 standard, but we do encourage you to get a copy of that standard so that you have it if you're going to be implementing an energy management system at your facility. Just so you guys can see, this is what the standard looks like, a hard copy of it anyway. You can also get electronic copies of it. And then for our slides themselves, they are very close to the wording in the standard. They're not identical, but anything that you see that is in red text is going to be a shall statement. And like Angela said, that is auditable. So that's something that you have to do. Anything that is in purple text is going to be documented information, which means you have to have some kind of record, meeting minutes, something along those lines, an SOP, something to document that part of the standard. There are 92 shall statements. It's a lot of shall statements, and there are 18 areas that it require documented information. Okay, so the first part that we're going to be talking about is the context and the leadership of the organization. So section 4 is all about the context of the organization. That's the one we're going to go into first, and then a little bit later I'll be talking about leadership. So the context of the organization, this is kind of like a diagram of the higher level overview of clause 4. It includes identifying the context and the interested parties, and then using those in order to determine the scope of the EMS. You will use the context and interested parties later on as well in the planning, which is clause 6, which Angela is going to be talking about later today. As part of like implementing your energy management system, you will also use them in clause 9.3, which asks management to consider these things when deciding if your ENMS is adequate and effective. Okay, so let's look at the standard. It says for 4.1, the organization shall determine external and internal issues that are relevant to its purpose and that affect its ability to achieve the intended outcomes of the ENMS and improve its energy performance. So as Angela noted, the energy management system, or the ENMS, and by the way, if you ever hear me say EMS, it's because I'm really used to talking about ISO 14001 standards. So I don't mean it, I mean ENMS. But anyway, it is a framework for establishing an energy policy, for setting objectives and energy targets, to develop and implement action plans. And the process is needed to achieve the objectives or goals and the energy targets. So in order to establish an ENMS or any management system for that matter, you need to understand your organization. And just as in some of the other ISO standards, that starts with understanding your context. So for those of you familiar with ISO 14001, you'll notice that in 50001, the standard does not require that you specifically take into account the environment when developing the organization's context. However, as you'll see in just a moment, there are definitely external factors, environmental external factors that can affect your organization. And so you probably should take those into account. The other thing to note is that the analysis of the organizational context provides a high-level conceptual understanding of the external and internal issues that can affect both positively and negatively your energy performance and therefore the ENMS. Okay, so understanding your context, here are some examples of things that affect or that are part of the context of your organization. Technical innovations that affect your ENMS, regulatory requirements, what are the market trends, who are your customers, what are the utility suppliers, and then even things like weather. You know, if it's a particularly hot summer, you're going to be using more energy to cool your buildings. That's going to affect your context. Okay, so let's look at some of the external issues that can be part of your context. Issues related to interested parties, such as existing national or sector objectives, requirements or standards, restrictions or limitations on energy supply, security and energy costs, or the availability of certain types of energy, the effects of weather, the effects of climate change, the effects of policy, legislation, or any other regulatory changes. Some other issues that can affect your context, or your E&MS and are therefore part of your context, are things like changes in rate structure, changes in legislation. For example, there was a major legislation that was passed in July of 2021. The North Carolina House blocked North Carolina from entering into a mandatory cap and trade program. So that was a major one where they were trying to push for this cap and trade program, but the House blocked it, so it's out. Also, legislatively, they might require renewable portfolios or certain forms of energy. Other external factors, you can have utilities. If your utility is prepared for an emergency situation like a hurricane, or if they're not, that absolutely is going to have an effect on your organization. If you're part of an energy co-op, the options for renewables might be kind of limited, or the option for getting any kind of funding for installing renewables could be limited. And then some other external factors to consider. What are your competitors doing? What kind of technology is evolving with regards to energy? Are there supply chain issues that affect that technology? What do your customers want? What are the changing attitudes of society? For example, there is a push for more ESG reporting, which ESG, if you're not familiar, is environmental, social, and governance. And investors are increasingly applying these non-financial factors as part of their analysis process in identifying material risks and growth opportunities. For example, this is noteworthy, by the way, guys, that the SEC, this Securities Exchange Commission, proposed a new policy that would make disclosing your GHGs mandatory. Now, what the rule actually says, and it's in the proposal state right now, but it says it would change the requirements that registrants would have to include certain certain climate-related disclosures in their registration statements and periodic reports, including information about climate-related risks, that they are reasonably likely to have a material impact on their business. It also changes the proposed rule would require the registrants disclose greenhouse gas emissions, specifically about its direct greenhouse gases, which is considered Scope 1, and indirect emissions from purchased electricity or other forms, which is considered Scope 2. And a registrant would be required to disclose GHG emissions from upstream and downstream activities in its supply chain, which is considered Scope 3. If materials or the registrant had set GHG emission targets and goals that included Scope 3. So this is a big change that would require openly traded organizations to disclose their GHGs. By the way, like I said, it's still in the comment period, so that comment period goes till June 15th, if you guys are interested. And then a little side note, if all of this climate reporting sounds a bit overwhelming, don't worry, we got you covered. ESI and WRP are working together to create a new greenhouse gas series where we will be discussing greenhouse gas reporting, including scopes 1, 2, and 3, and how to reduce your emissions. The first webinar series will be held virtually on July 21st at 10 a.m. It will feature Dr. Perry from Duke University. He's going to be giving some background information on greenhouse gases, and it will also feature a case study from Sarah Fraser with New Belgium Brewing Company. She's going to be showcasing their greenhouse gas reductions. So if you're interested, you guys already should be on our mailing list because you got access to this event. So you should be getting an email from us within the next week or so about that event where you can register. And then in the same time frame, it will be available on our website. If you go to our website, which is www.nceis.org, under the events page, it is under the energy, or will be under the energy management series. Give us about a week to get that registration up. Now, back to what we're originally here for, which is understanding the organization's context. It's a lot of external factors I just talked about that can affect your E&MS, but there's also internal factors that can affect your E&MS and that need to be considered in your context. So some examples of that are your core business objectives and strategies, your asset management plans, your internal resources like labor, finances, etc., that affect your organization, your energy management maturity and culture, your sustainability considerations, contingency plans for interruption of the energy supply chain, maturity of existing technology, and operational risks and liability considerations. Let's see here, some additional external factors. What do your shareholders want? What do your investors want? Do you have a good relationship with your energy providers? Do you understand the rates, your rate contracts? What about resiliency planning? For example, do you have generators that are in the basement, but you're in an area where flooding could be an issue, and then the flooding in the basement, you wouldn't have power? Or is there something that you can switch if you can't get diesel for your generators because of some kind of environmental issue like a hurricane or something? Do you have a backup, maybe switching to propane or a battery backup generator as opposed to a diesel one? And then what about maturing technologies? Do you have forklifts that are aging out? Maybe they were propane forklifts and you guys could switch to something that is battery or hydrogen operated. So those are some considerations. Okay, so when we're talking about your context, how do you implement it? What does this stuff mean? You've done all of this like thought experiment on like, okay, how can we be affected by external issues and internal issues? What does it mean? Well, you need to identify how you are going to develop your organization's context. Is this going to be a thought experiment where you guys all sit in a room and have these thoughts? Or is it going to be a documented process? By the way, did anyone see any purple on these slides? I'm going to guess you're all saying no because I can't hear you, but I'm going to guess you said no because there's been no purple, so it is not necessary to document it. However, you do have to be able to show an auditor that you have done these things and that you do take the context into consideration for other parts, like when you are planning. So it might be a good idea to document it even though it's not a requirement. Some ways that you could document it, you could put it in a manual, an SOP, you could have it part of your business strategy or your strategic plan or your business continuity plan. It could be discussed in meeting minutes. All of those things are totally good. Like I said, it doesn't require you to document it, but it's a good idea. Okay, and just as a big picture overview, you do want to take into account strategic direction. Where's your organization going, and your purpose? Like, what do you guys do? What do you make? Those things should be taken into account when you're talking about your context. Okay, any questions on context before we move on to needs and expectations of interested parties?
I don't see any questions at this time, Davy.
All right, excellent. If you guys have any, feel free to just raise your hand or pop them in the question box and I'll take them. Okay, So 4.2 is all about understanding the needs and expectations of interested parties. Basically, 4.1, you're looking at all of the needs and issues that are facing the organization, and 4.2 is all about understanding the needs of those that the organization affects. So I'll read this, the shall statement to you. It says the organization shall determine interested parties that are relevant to energy performance and the ENMS, the relevant requirements of those interested parties, and which of the identified needs and expectations of the organizations addressed through which of the which are addressed through the ENMS. So when we're talking about interested parties, some examples are investors, stakeholders, employees, owners, customers, suppliers, regulators, local authorities, community, and competitors. Okay, organization shall ensure it has access to the applicable legal and other requirements related to its energy efficiency, energy use, and energy consumption. Determine how these requirements apply to its energy efficiency, energy use, and energy consumption. Ensure that these requirements are taken into account, and review at defined intervals its legal and other requirements. So I have some notes here for this, this slide. The first is that a lot of the new standards have moved to something called compliance obligations instead of referring to them as legal and other requirements. The energy standard has not. It's left it as legal and other requirements because energy is something that is less of a compliance regulation, and more it has other kinds of regulations and other legal requirements. So it just a note that if you have more than one ISO standard that you guys are auditing to, it's just a different wording, but it's basically the same thing as a compliance obligation. Another note is that energy efficiency is defined as the ratio or other quantitative relationship between an output of performance, service, goods, commodities, or energy, and an input of energy. So it's the energy required over the energy consumed. Energy use is the application of energy. So some examples are ventilation, lighting, cooling, data storage, etc. And energy consumption is the quantity of energy applied or obtained to obtain a required outcome. So your energy use is how it's actually being used, and your energy consumption is a quantity. And then another clarification is this says take into account. And the standard uses two words. It uses take into account and consider, and they have colloquially, they have the same meaning, but in the standard, they have a very defined meaning. So take into account means that it is necessary to think about the topic, but you cannot exclude it. Whereas consider means that you can think, it is necessary to think about it, but it can be excluded. So consider, you're like, I considered it, but I'm not going to do anything about it. I thought about it, but I decided it's not necessary. Whereas take into account, you have to think about it and you have to make sure that you do something about it. So in this line, it says ensure that the requirements are taken into account. So you have to do something about it. Okay, moving on, how do you implement this? You need to identify how you'll identify the interested parties. Yet again, did you see any purple? Nope, no purple, so you don't have to have any documented information, but it's still a really good idea. And you also you don't have to have any kind of SOP on how you're going to identify interested parties, but it's also a good idea. Figure out how you are going to identify those interested parties. You'll want to figure out how you'll ensure access to the requirements and how you'll review and what you'll put in your manual. Is there going to be an SOP? Is there a list of requirements? Doesn't specify that you have to, but still a good idea. You could also have this be a discussion in your meeting minutes and have that be, somehow your documentation or your proof that you're doing something, that you're looking at the needs and expectations of interested parties. All right. And then, oops, sorry. Just kind of to recap all about context and interested parties, you'll want to have you gathered the information when you are establishing your scope, because you're going to need the context and the interested parties when establishing your scope, which is what we're going to be talking about next. Okay, so the determining the scope is 4.3 of your ENMS. The organization shall determine boundaries and applicability of the ENMS to establish its scope. When determining an ENMS scope, it's hard to say, the organization shall consider external and internal issues, that was 4.1, and the requirements referred to in 4.2. The organization shall ensure that it has the authority to control its energy efficiency, energy use, and energy consumption within its scopes and boundaries. And the organization shall not exclude any type of energy within the scope and boundaries. The ENMS scope and boundaries shall be maintained as documented information. Okay, so I have some notes here. It says that you shall not exclude any type of energy within the scope. So that means we should probably define what energy is. So the standard defines energy as electricity, fuel, steam, heat, compressed air, and other similar medias. It refers to various types of energy, including renewables, which can be purchased, stored, treated, used in equipment or in a process, or recovered. Okay, so you can't exclude, let's say, fuels from your ENMS and just regulate or just worry about your electricity. You have to include all of the different energy types that you use. Does your scope need to be documented? Yeah, there's the purple there. Yes, so this is one where you actually do have to have documented information of your scope. All right, so when considering the boundaries and applicability, you want to include the range of products and services, different sites and activities that you have, any external provisions of processes, products, and services, common support providers by centralized functions, processes, procedures, instructions, and site-specific requirements. Your scope can include the whole organization. It can include specific and identified functions within the organization, specific sections of the organization, and one or more functions across a group of organizations. However, auditors could challenge you if you guys decide, well, my scope doesn't include these certain functions, but those certain functions have a significant energy use or impact. So just be aware of that. You want to make sure that your scope is reasonable and is consistently applied. All right, so moving on to 4.4, which is establishing an energy management system. It says the organization shall establish, implement, maintain, and continually improve an ENMS, including the processes needed and their interactions, and continually improve energy performance in accordance with the requirement of the ISO 50001 standard. The process needed, the process needed can differ from one organization to another due to the size of the organization and its type of activities, processes, products, and services, and obviously its energy uses, the complexity of the process and their interactions, and the competency of the employees. ISO 50001 requires an organization to demonstrate continual energy improvement. It's defined as improvement in measurable results of energy efficiency or energy consumption related to energy use compared to your baseline. There are no quantitative targets that are specified within the standard, and the organization defines its own targets. And you create an action plan in order to get to those targets, objectives, goals. Okay, so to help lock in energy improvements longer term, continual improvement here can mean periodically reinforcing those gains in energy and behaviors, as well as being alert for new cost-effective opportunities as they arise. So you get to a point where you've lowered your energy use so much that there's not a whole lot with technology being what it is right now that you can do, but you can still continually improve by reinforcing those things and then being on the lookout for new cost-effective opportunities as they arise. Energy reviews are used to understand reality, consider where to focus your efforts, and prioritize opportunities, feeding into objectives, targets, and action plans. Operational controls, design standards, and procurement processes all help ensure that those behaviors those targets are achieved by reducing the opportunity for other kinds of behaviors. So if you have a procurement process that ensures that you buy only energy efficient appliances, for example, then that's going to make sure that you are achieving those targets. And then obviously monitoring those targets, doing your internal audits, having your management review, all of that helps with the continual improvement, making sure that you're going in the right direction. Okay, so that was all context. Now we're going to be looking at leadership of the organization, which is 5.1, 5.2, and 5.3. 5.1 is all about leadership and commitment. It includes ensuring the integration of your business processes. You're looking at resources that are available, communication is effective, you're promoting continual improvement, and ensuring that the ENMS meets the intended outcomes. 5.2 is going to be your energy policy. It is the roles of senior management to ensure that the policy is appropriate and provides a framework for setting objectives and energy targets, and includes a commitment to satisfy legal and other requirements to continually improve. And then 5.3 is going to be your organizational roles and responsibilities. Your top management ensures that relevant roles are assigned to appropriate and responsible people so that they report energy performance and ensure that the ENMS conforms to the requirements of the standard. So we're going to look at those a little bit more in detail. Okay, this one gets a little lengthy, so bear with me as I read to you, but the 5.1 is all about leadership and commitment. It says top management, and I'm going to interrupt myself before I continue reading and give you a definition. Top management is a person or group of people who directs and controls the organization at the highest level. Unless only part of the organization is within the scope, then it's the highest level of management over an area within the scope. So those are your top people at your organization. top management shall demonstrate leadership and commitment with respect to continual improvement of its energy performance and the effectiveness of the ENMS by ensuring that the ENMS scope and boundaries are established, ensuring that the energy policy, which is 5.2, objectives and energy targets, which is 6.2, are established and are compatible with the strategic direction of the organization, ensuring the integration of the ENMS requirements into the organization's business processes. And note here, business in this document can be interpreted broadly to mean the activities that are core to the purpose of the organization's existence. So it doesn't necessarily mean business in the way that we think of business. It could be any other kind of organization as well. They also are responsible for ensuring that actions planned are approved and implemented, ensuring that the resources needed for the ENMS are available, communicating the importance of the effective environmental management and of conforming to the ENMS requirements. And it continues because they're responsible for a lot. They are also responsible for ensuring that the ENMS achieves its intended outcomes, promoting continual improvements of the energy performance and the ENMS, ensuring the formation of an energy management team, which we'll talk more about in just a few minutes, directing and supporting persons to contribute to the effectiveness of the ENMS and to the energy performance improvement, supporting other relative management roles to demonstrate their leadership as it applies to their area of responsibility, ensuring that the ENPI appropriately represents energy performance, and finally, ensuring that processes are established and implemented to identify and address changes affecting the ENMS and energy performances within the scope and boundary of the ENMS. So this is a lot on top management. It's ultimately their responsibility to make sure that the energy management system functions as it's supposed to. However, they are able to delegate those responsibilities, but ultimately it falls on them. So even though other people might be doing these things, they are the ones who are ultimately responsible. So they have to provide the resources. They actually have to, in some cases, delegate the authority for the ENMS. So a couple of notes that I have for the slide are the ENPI. I'm going to read you guys that definition, which is in the standard. ENPI stands for Energy Performance Indicator. It is a measure or unit of energy performance as defined by the organization. Note that the ENPI can be expressed by using a simple metric or ratio or model, depending on the nature of the activities being measured. So that's your energy performance indicator. Okay, and as I said, top management is usually empowered to delegate the authority and provide resources within the organization. It is that latter piece about providing resources that is really important, because it's required for altering energy consumption. If we're talking about equipment that uses a lot of energy in order to convert into something that is more energy efficient. The standard is holistic, and there are other implied leadership requirements within other clauses. For example, in clause 6, which is planning, there is strategic support around identifying the risks and opportunities within the organization that top management is responsible for. In 7, which is support, there are many instances where it is top management's role to provide a sign-off in order to support the aims of the ENMS. This includes provisions of resources, gaining competence, ensuring awareness, effective communication, and appropriate documented information. In clause 8, which is operations, certain operational control designs and procurement needs. In many cases, top management is going to be responsible for that. For clause 9, which is performance evaluation, top management needs to understand the overall organization's energy performance as a key overhead and the output of the internal audits, and be actively involved in the management review process, obviously. And then also in clause 10, which is continual improvement, top management influences the culture of an organization, and that's really what helps that continual improvement. So top management has a big responsibility. If employees observe top management asserting responsibility for the energy management, this will greatly assist in the establishment of a positive energy culture throughout. All right, so when it comes to leadership and commitment, how do you implement it? How do you ensure that responsibilities are met? How do you show conformance during an audit? Well, leadership commitment can be shown by aligning the energy management system with the organization's business objectives, by ensuring the necessary resources are available for the ENMS, by encouraging employees and other relevant interested parties to become actively involved in the improving the energy performance, involving everyone in the energy decisions that affect them, and promoting open discussion about energy performance. The organization can improve the energy culture by providing clear and consistent leadership, promoting formal and informal involvement of employees. And when communicating to those in the organization, top management can emphasize the importance of energy management through employee involvement activities such as empowerment, motivation, recognition, training, rewards, and participation. But did you guys see any purple on any of those slides about leadership? Any documented information necessary? Okay. No. So there wasn't any purple, so it does not need to be documented. However, sorry, I went too far. However, you do need to have a way to demonstrate it to an auditor. So make sure that this stuff is, something that you have some kind of evidence of. Okay, 5.2 is all about the energy policy. Before we go on, does anyone have any questions about 5.1?
Not seeing anything right now, Davey. We did have a question earlier that we addressed. If you don't mind, let me remind everyone regarding that question.
Absolutely.
Today and tomorrow's sessions are being recorded, and the PowerPoint slides, handouts, and a recording link will be made available to everyone. That will be at www.ncesi.org. But we'll remind you all of that tomorrow as well. But thank you, Davey.
Excellent, thanks, Don. Okay, so you can hear me again if you really want to hear all of this again. So 5.2 is all about the energy policy. Top management shall establish an energy policy that is appropriate to the purpose of the organization, provides a framework for setting and reviewing objective and energy targets, which is all 6.2. includes a commitment to ensure the availability of information and necessary resources to achieve objectives and energy targets, includes a commitment to satisfy applicable legal requirements and other requirements, which is 4.2, related to the energy efficiency, energy use, and energy consumption, includes a commitment to continual improvement, which is 10.2, of the energy performance and the ENMS, and then supports the procurement, which is 8.3, of energy efficient products and services that impact energy performance, and supports design, which is 8.2, of activities that consider energy performance improvements. And commitment, when we're talking about the word commitment, this is not a definition from the actual standard, but from Oxford Dictionary. It is a dedication to a cause or activity. So it's something that you are actually strongly dedicated towards. It's not just fly by the seat of your pants, or as Angela was saying, the flavor of the month. You actually are making a commitment to do these things. And then same thing, support. The definition we're talking about is giving assistance to, especially financially, to enable it to function or to act. Okay. So continuing on with energy policy, the energy policy shall be available as documented information. We'll talk more about documented information in 7.5, but it needs to be available as documented information, needs to be communicated within the organization. It needs to be available to interested parties, 4.2, as applicable, and be periodically reviewed and updated as necessary. Quick note, there's some purple on that screen in addition to red, so I know I already said it, but I like to really hammer it in that it does need to be something that is documented. So far we've had our scope needing to be documented, and we've had our policy that needs to be documented. Okay, 5.3, organizational roles, responsibilities, and authorities. Again, with that top management, they shall ensure that the responsibilities and authorities for relevant roles are assigned and communicated within the organization. Top management shall assign the responsibility and authority to the energy management team for ensuring that the ENMS is established, implemented, maintained, and continually improved, ensuring that the ENMS conforms to the requirements of the ISO 50001 standard, implementing actions planned, which is 6.2, to continually improve energy performance, reporting on the performance of the ENMS and improvement of energy performance to top management at determined intervals, and establishing criteria and methods needed to ensure that the operation and control of the ENMS are effective. So in previous standards for other ISOs, like ISO 14001, they used to have what was called an EMR, which was environmental management representative, and all of these things were given to one person. Now, and with the energy, it is it's done to a team, which is obviously going to be better because that's a lot of responsibility, and you really do need a team of people in order to make it function. Okay, so the energy management team will be essential for the success of the ENMS. Who should participate in the energy management team? Some top management would be fantastic. Definitely want to have your environmental staff. If you have energy staff as well, awesome. If you have your facilities management team, some leadership in facilities management, that would be good. Procurement people, because they're the ones who are buying stuff, they need to know that there are requirements in the energy management system. And then any staff that has a major part or uses a lot of energy, maybe they work in a certain area that uses a lot of energy, you'd want to have them involved as well. Okay, so that's it for 4 and 5. And then we're going to move on to planning, which Angela's going to take over. But before,
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, if we have any questions, let us know. It's a good break to ask questions.
Were there any in there?
No, I was addressing one to Tony, and y'all can confirm this with me. He was asking if there would be a different link for tomorrow's session. I've replied that
It's the same.
it's the same one, but they'll also be getting a reminder from D. Hannick, correct? And that'll be
Yes.
the same link that you can utilize. So you should get one today, 24 hours out, and then another one tomorrow, probably an hour out. So other than that, looks like we are in the clear.
All right. Can someone confirm that you're seeing my slides now? Here, I'll move forward so you can tell.
We can see them, yes, Angela.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So remember back from the beginning of today when we were talking about the plan, do, check, act cycle. So what Davey just went over, those 2 sections were that framework piece. So what I'm going to do is go over planning today. So we'll do the plan section, and then tomorrow we'll go through do, check, and act. So let's move on to that. All right, let me move this so I can see it. I know you guys can't, but it was in my way. All right. All right, so we start with 6.1, which is the actions to address risks and opportunities. Risks and opportunities is a fairly new concept in the ISO standards of late. You know, you've probably heard about aspects and impacts if you've done environmental management systems. Energy management systems is kind of similar when we're talking about risks and opportunities. So when you're planning for your ENMS, the organization shall consider the issues referred to in your context, so that piece that Davey was talking about, and the requirements referred to in the interested parties, so anything that your outside organizations or other folks that have an interest in your operations that you've decided to act upon, and review the organization's activities and processes that can affect your energy performance. So you have to look both outside yourself and within yourself for these risks and opportunities for improvement. Your planning shall be consistent with the energy policy and shall lead to actions that result in continual improvement in your energy performance. All right, so basically this is saying that you're going to do what you say you're going to do, right? You're not just putting this down on paper and then letting it sit on a shelf. You're actually going to act on what you are developing here. Risks and opportunities continues with the organization shall determine risks and opportunities that need to be addressed in order to give assurance that your energy management system can achieve its intended outcomes, including your energy performance improvement, prevent or reduce undesired effects, and achieve continual improvement of your energy management system and energy performance. So the definition of risks and opportunities are the potential effects of uncertainty or the deviation from the expected. So a risk is something that poses a threat, and an opportunity is something that has the potential for a positive impact. So when you're looking for things that might be examples of risks and opportunities in the energy world, you're thinking about things like weather that's either much hotter or much colder than you expect. Severe weather such as hurricanes, tornadoes, and thunderstorms. Maybe you've contracted a design team that doesn't follow specs, so you want to make sure you have incorporated those risks into your plans. Maybe you have a complicated data collection process that needs to be documented so that it is achieved properly, or maybe simplified in some way. Maybe you have a high turnover rate in operational control positions for your significant energy users. So you want to make sure that you have something in place to keep that risk from being a detriment to you. Maybe you have poorly maintained equipment that decreases in efficiency over time, and so you need a way to ensure that that equipment is being properly maintained and replaced as needed. Perhaps you have limited capital resources. Don't we all have limited capital resources? So that might be a risk that you have to deal with when you are setting your goals. And then maybe you have a long and difficult capital improvement process. Maybe it takes years to get things approved. So that can be a risk for achieving the goals that you're setting. So just think about all those kinds of things that are, related to your energy usage, but not necessarily energy themselves when you're thinking about risks and opportunities. The standard continues with the organization shall plan actions to address those risks and opportunities, and then how you're going to integrate and implement the actions into your ENMS and your energy performance processes, and also how you're going to evaluate the effectiveness of those actions. So basically what it says is if you're going to document something as a risk or an opportunity, then what can you do to mitigate that risk or take advantage of the opportunity? The standard requires actions to be planned for any risk or opportunity that you document, right? So basically, if you are saying that this is a risk or an opportunity that needs to be dealt with, then you need to figure out how you're going to deal with it. All right. So moving on, you have objectives, energy targets, and planning. So basically, this is saying that the organization shall establish objectives at relevant functions and levels, and the organization shall establish energy targets. So this is your goals. These are your energy goals, and your objectives can include improvements to the energy management itself, or they can be specific performance goals to improve your energy efficiency or reduce your energy usage. The objectives and energy targets shall be consistent with your policy, be measurable if practicable. Practicable means if it's at all possible, not if it's convenient. So you need to make sure that your goals can be measured if at all possible. You need to take into account applicable requirements. You need to consider your SEUs, which is 6.3, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. But an SEU is a significant energy user. Take into account your opportunities to improve your energy performance, be monitored, be communicated, and be updated as appropriate. Again, this is a living system. You're not, writing this down on a piece of paper and then putting it up on a shelf to collect dust. This is saying you are going to set goals and then you are going to do what you need to in order to achieve those goals. The organization shall retain documented information. So for Davy's sake, that's purple. That means you have to write these down on your objectives and on your energy targets. All right. So when you're planning how to achieve your objectives and targets, the organization shall establish and maintain action plans that include what you're going to do, what resources you need, who's responsible, when it's going to be completed, how the results will be evaluated, including the methods that you're going to use to verify your performance. And then the organization shall consider how the actions to achieve its objectives and energy targets can be integrated into your business processes. Your organization shall retain documented information on your action plan. So when you're creating your plans, you have to write down what you're going to do step by step to achieve your goals. So once you have your goal, then you need to establish a plan for achieving that goal. This is a list of your planned actions and milestones. You also need to document what resources are going to be needed, including money, people, time, anything else that might be needed, space. You also need to establish who's responsible for the goal, and maybe the individual steps, as well as the time frame for completing each of those steps and the goal as a whole. And finally, you need to establish how are you going to track your progress? If you're familiar with SMART goals, this is a good application for using those, because remember that SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. And if you're writing your goals in that SMART goal format, then you've met most of the shalls in this section. As for integration, you might consider how you share other goals within your organization. So who within your organization is needed for achieving those goals? And if you can get input from various departments and functions, that will improve your chances for improvement. If a project works in one area, you might want to implement it or something similar in other areas. Think about, are energy projects included in your budget discussions? Are there energy requirements that you can include in the procurement process? We have a facility at one point in the ESI that required all large equipment that comes into the plant to be equipped with an energy tracking device to help manage energy usage and have that information needed to make any various improvements on that piece of equipment or similar pieces of equipment. So those are all pieces of how you can set your goals, but also how you can monitor them later. 6.3 talks about an energy review. So the organization shall develop and conduct an energy review. In order to do that, you develop an energy review. The organization shall analyze your energy usage and your consumption based on measurement and other data. You identify the current types of energy you use. Remember what Davey was talking about, that when we talk about energy and types, it's not just electricity. We're also talking about the fuels that you use and any other energy systems like compressed air or steam, or maybe you're part of a combined heat and power, any of those things where you are getting work out of a device or a system. That all counts towards your energy. So you want to identify all the types of energy that you have, and then evaluate your past and current energy use and consumption. And based on that analysis, you're going to figure out which of those are your significant energy users. And then for each significant energy user, you're going to determine what the variables are, the current energy performance, and then identify the person doing work under your control that affect that significant energy user. So for those of you who are new to ISO 50000 but are used to 14001, think of your significant energy users as those significant aspects. These are the things that you really need to control, and that you need to know who is involved with so that they get additional training if needed, or you work with them closely in order to figure out what improvement opportunities you've got. Then you also need to determine and prioritize opportunities for improving your performance and establish future energy use and energy consumption. So first of all, what types of energy do you have? You want to think about electricity, natural gas, fuel oil, propane, wood, again, that compressed air, steam, any of that. And then you need to figure out what devices use it. So your chillers, your boilers, your fans, your pumps, lighting, compressors, any other machinery that you might have, your HVAC, all of that. And then once you know what you have, then you need to determine how much you use. You can use past utility bills. Those are the most likely sources for electricity, unless you have meters that are already in place. If you do have meters on specific buildings or pieces of equipment, then that will help narrow your focus areas. But you also might need to look at, how much oil you're using, or the steam, or whatever, however you manage currently the usage of those resources, then that's going to help you figure out your baselines, right? You need to look at your trends over time, note where there are spikes or dips, and try to determine why those occurred. And maybe you'll consider normalizing the data to either production or your work hours, something to figure out what's going on. It could even be weather related, right? Remember, those high weather days and those low weather days may affect your energy usage. And then to determine your significant energy users, you may want to put them in order by how much energy is used, and then decide which of those are the largest users. You may want to install energy tracking devices to help you determine specific equipment that has higher energy demands in order to assist with that. And then your significant energy users can be facilities, or they can be systems, or they can be processes, or they can be specific pieces of equipment. It really just kind of depends on what level of sub-metering you may have or may be able to put in place, and also the types of energy that you are using, and how you decide you want to figure out what is significant, whether that's going to be by cost, whether that's going to be by usage, whether that's going to be by emissions. You can choose. For each significant energy user, then you need to figure out what changes can affect your energy usage for that specific user. So for example, heating degree days or cooling degree days, maybe your average outside temperature or humidity, your working hours or occupancy, production output, anything like that. You might want to see what effects those have on the energy usage that you are tracking. And then from these, you can determine what's measured, what can be measured, its current performance, and who has control over the device, including your contractors. You want to figure out what kind of improvements can be made to those significant energy users and decide which ones will be worked on and in what order, since you probably don't have the resources to do everything at once, because no one does. You may request an energy audit from outside sources like the Waste Reduction Partners to get a list of potential projects. NC State and other universities, I believe UNC Charlotte, now has the DOE grant for energy reductions. And so those are all good resources for getting an outside energy assessment. The Waste Reduction Partners do low cost, no cost, and they're starting to get into a little bit more involved projects. But I know that State and Charlotte can do full boiler audits and motor audits and those kinds of things. So if you need something more involved, you can definitely reach out to them and we can help connect you if you need that. And I think tomorrow, one of the last slides has some of those connections on there for you. You should also bring in folks that work with energy using equipment and brainstorm energy savings possibilities. So, the folks that are working on it within your facility, but you might also talk to your vendors who provided that equipment and see what options there may be. There could be some software that could be added that could help you with control. And then you just estimate what emissions may, not emissions, but what energy usage you may have. So how you define your significant energy users is up to you. However, you want to make sure that you can repeat how you did that in the future so that someone else can look at it and get the same answer that you did. All right. Moving on, continuing 6.3, the energy review shall be updated at defined intervals. So you decide how often that's going to be, as well as in response to major changes in facilities, equipment, systems, or energy using processes. And then the organization shall maintain as documented information the methods and criteria used to develop your energy review, and shall retain documented information of its results. So you have to document not only the review itself, the data that you come up with, but also how you came up with that data. As I mentioned, you want to make it so that it's repeatable, and the best way to do that is to document it. And in this case, the standard requires that you do that. So the energy review must be updated at specific intervals and when major changes in sites, equipment, systems, or energy using processes take place. The specific interval for updating is defined by your organization. It can be chosen for the energy review as a whole, or as defined for individual components of the energy review, or it can be defined as an interval specific only to updating the energy opportunity. So it's up to you how often you perform this operation, but it should definitely be defined on a regular basis, and also be done anytime you have something big happen. So maybe you're going to do a plant expansion, or maybe you're going from 1 shift to 3 shifts, or anything that is going to increase or decrease your energy usage drastically. You should definitely perform your energy review again. All right, moving on. 6.4 is energy performance indicators. So Davey mentioned these earlier. The organization shall determine those performance indicators that are appropriate for measuring and monitoring your performance, and enable the organization to demonstrate energy performance improvement. So what are you going to be looking at that's going to show that you're making progress towards your goals? The method for determining and updating the energy performance indicators shall be maintained as documented information. So you're going to make sure that's written down, how you're actually going to determine what your performance indicators are and how you're going to update those. Where the organization has data indicating that relevant variables significantly affect energy performance, the organization shall consider such data to establish those appropriate performance indicators. And then the performance indicator values shall be reviewed and compared to their respective energy baselines. That's what E and B means, as appropriate. The organization shall retain documented information of your performance indicator values, right? So it's telling you have to keep records of what your performance indicator data is. So what are the ENPIs? They are the performance indicators. They're a measure or unit of energy performance as defined by your organization. So you might use something like kilowatt hours per square foot for a building, or total million BTUs per pound of steam for a large central boiler. You might use total kilowatt hours per ton for a chiller. Your performance indicators can be a simple metric, it can be a ratio, it can be a model, or anything else. It really just kind of depends on the type of energy that we're talking about, maybe even the device that we're talking about. Energy performance indicators are tracked, recorded, and trended over time, right? So how are you going to select those? Well, what do you already measure and use? First of all, that would be the best place to start, because if you're already tracking stuff, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. But you do need to make sure that you're covering all of your energy usage. So maybe you're already tracking your electricity, but are you tracking your fuel usage? That kind of thing. What is going to help you determine your overall energy performance? Who currently collects and monitors that data, and then who is going to approve the selection of your performance indicator. So once you have this list, you know, what group is going to look at that and say, okay, these are the ones that we are going to capture for our performance indicators of record for this standard. And it might be all of them, and it might only be a few of them. That's up to you. Your methodology for determining and updating your performance indicators must be documented. And that means you must be able to show it to an auditor. And you have to compare your performance indicators to the established baselines for these indicators. So wait, baselines? Yes, baselines. That's the next part of the standard. I feel like they did this a little bit backwards. But they do require baselines, so that's 6.5. And yes, you have to establish baselines too for each of those performance indicators that you're going to be tracking. You have to have that baseline data so you have a comparison to show your progress. So the standard says the organization shall establish an energy baseline using the information from the energy review, taking into account at suitable periods of time. Where the organization has data indicating that relevant variables significantly affect your energy performance, the organization shall carry out normalization of the performance indicator values and corresponding baselines. So normalization for energy usage, that's affected by something specific. The standard requires normalization to that variable. So for example, If production rates significantly impact the amount of energy used, then you have to calculate the usage compared to the variable. So that would be like production or weather or employee work hours. It's how much energy is used per widget, or how much energy is used on a high heating day or a high cooling day, right? Or how much energy is used per employee work hour. How are you going to make that data make sense over time is basically what you're looking for. This comparison can help show progress even when actual usage is increasing. All right. The baseline shall be revised in the case of one or more of the following. So if your performance indicators no longer reflect your energy performance, if you've had major changes to your static factors, and we'll talk about static factors in a minute, and then according to any predetermined method that you may set. And the organization shall retain information of your baselines, relevant variable data, and modifications to your baselines as documented information. So basically you're writing all of this down and keeping track of it. All right, so planning for collecting your data, that's 6.6. Organizations shall ensure that your key characteristics of your operations affecting your performance are identified, measured, monitored, and analyzed at planned intervals. So the organization shall define and implement an energy data collection plan appropriate to your size, your complexity, your resources, and the measurement and monitoring equipment that you have. The plan shall specify the data necessary to monitor the key characteristics and state how and at what frequency the data shall be collected and retained. So basically what this is saying is, what are you going to measure? How are you going to measure it? How often are you going to measure it? Who's responsible for measuring it? How is the data recorded? How and when will the data measured be compared to the baseline or a more recent measurement in order to demonstrate progress? So how is the data maintained and backed up, right? So this is all about controlling that data piece, right? So planning for your collection continuing on is data to be collected or acquired by measurements applicable and retained documented information shall include the relevant variables for your significant energy users. So once you define the significant energy users, there is a lot in the standard that's tied to it, just like if it was a significant aspect in the environmental world. Once you define it as significant, then you have a lot more that you have to do with it. The energy consumption related to your significant energy users and the organization, your operational criteria related to that significant energy user, static factors, if applicable, data specified in action plans, and then the energy data collection plan shall be reviewed at defined intervals and updated as appropriate. So you need to figure out how often you're going to look at this plan that you have set for tracking your data. A static factor, I know I've mentioned it twice now in this particular element, that is an identified factor that doesn't routinely change, but does affect your energy performance significantly. So for example, the size of your facility doesn't change very often, but the size of your facility does have a huge impact on the amount of energy that you use. Maybe if your product mix doesn't change very often, but it does affect the amount of energy you use, employee hours and shifts, those kinds of things. When there is a major shift in one of those, it makes a huge difference in the amount of energy that you use. A lot of people found this out, in COVID when we shut down for a little while, that when nobody was there, how much their energy was reduced, but also how much energy was still being used just by having certain things on all the time. So it was a good way to set baselines with nothing running except, the house lights and the compressors in the background and those kinds of things. All right, 6.6. So continuing on with this, is energy data collection plan shall be reviewed at defined intervals and updated as appropriate. So you decide how often that's going to be. But anytime you are reviewing it, make sure that you're documenting that it's done, so that you can show that you've done it. There's not a requirement. There's no purple there saying you need to do it. But remember that each one of these shalls is auditable. So how are you going to show that you have done this review if you don't document it somewhere? The organization shall ensure that the equipment used for the measurement of your key characteristics provides data which are accurate and repeatable. We were talking about this the other day, and while this standard doesn't specifically say calibration, that statement to me says calibration. So when it's talking about you having measurements that are accurate and repeatable, how are you going to make sure that's the case? So I would look at the types of equipment that you're using for those measurements and whether or not they are either calibrated or verifiable in some way. And then the organization shall retain documented information on measurement, monitoring, and other means of establishing accuracy and repeatability. So how are you going to verify that the data that you have is accurate and that you're looking at it on a regular basis? Okay, so that gets us to the end of the planning section. And that's a lot for today. Between Davey and I going through framework and planning. Are there any questions out there on any of that?
Not at the moment, but we are still open for business.
Yep. So while you're thinking or typing, again, I'd like to mention that Advanced Energy, if we hadn't mentioned them already, they, I believe, sit at NC State. They are their own thing, but I believe they're sitting at NC State right now. They have a grant from the Department of Energy that they are the providers of this 50,001 Ready tool, and they host cohorts of groups to work together. So in a similar way that we have environmental management system modules that goes in depth on implementation for environmental management systems, they have a similar process in these 50,001 Ready cohorts for the energy management system. So, and every now and then they'll shoot us an email and say, hey, can you find out from your members and others if there are any folks that would like to participate in a cohort. And so we've sent that out a couple of times, and we've had lots of members take advantage of participating in their 50,001 Ready cohorts and actually go through the process of becoming ISO 50001 certified and working with them. They can also provide some more specific assistance on helping you implement as well. So right now we mainly do overview courses with 50,001, and like Davey said, we are going to be getting more into the carbon accounting side to provide some assistance, but we highly recommend also reaching out to Advanced Energy for specific 50,001 assistance if you are planning to go down that route, at least participating in one of their cohorts, so that you have some other folks that you can bounce ideas off of that are also working towards that system. So any questions? All right.
No, but I take that as a reflection upon both you and Davey. So great job.
Either that or we just put them all to sleep. It's all good. All right. Well, we will let you go for this afternoon. Again, if you think of anything overnight, jot it down and ask us tomorrow. We will be back. The same link that worked today should work for tomorrow. And we will finish out the standard, talking about the do, check, and act pieces of the standard. And that should be it for the overview. All right. Let me open my little thingy back up. All right. Thank you all for attending, and we will see you tomorrow.